There's a lot of clickbait, there's a lot of sensational headlines. It's just the perfect storm, and that can really be harmful. We know misinformation leads to worse health outcomes.
There was a total fake of you made promoting something that you weren't actually promoting.
People started calling my office asking for these medicines that, I cannot promote or stand against. How do we help our patients thrive after a cancer diagnosis? What bigger measure of success is that, right? Then we directly help the patient. And then the echo chamber of social media just continues. I think one of the biggest challenges is clearly
We need to talk about health misinformation. In the age of AI, it's way more complex than you think, and it's dangerous. My guest in this episode is no stranger to the power of social media as a platform for taking health communication beyond the clinic to reach patients often where they're at their most vulnerable. But my conversation with Dr. Eleonora Teplinsky also shines a light on the dangers of trusting everything you see on social media and how to protect yourself. So let's go. Well, I'm so glad to be joined today by Dr. Eleonora Teplinsky. She's a board-certified medical oncologist. She's host of the Interlude podcast and author of a new book coming out in 2026, Beyond the Pink. Dr. Teplinsky, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, brilliant. Just to kind of kick off, could you tell us about where you are right now? What's the view from your chair?
Yeah, so I'm in New Jersey. It is kind of one of those weird fall days where it's cold in the morning, hot in the afternoon, pretty cloudy outside. I see the hospital across the street. So kind of cozy in my office here and excited to have this conversation.
It's great. Brilliant. Well, tell us a little bit more about, what you do, how long you've been doing it, and what got you into that field.
And so I'm a breast and GYN medical oncologist. So I treat patients with breast and gynecologic cancers. And I've been doing that for about a decade at this point. One of the things that brings me a lot of joy and that I love doing is really patient education. And I realized, years ago that we just couldn't do as much patient education in the clinic that I wanted to due to time constraints and, you had to cover all these things and people were leaving. And I just felt like, they're not getting their questions answered. And so I started doing some education on social media, just talking about the topics that I talk about in the office and trying to reach people on a little bit of a bigger scale and help people gain access to credible information that is evidence-based, free of misinformation that is so pervasive online. And that has led to a podcast and a book. And really, I need to continue to do this work because people are getting their health information online. And so it's really important for doctors and other health professionals to show up there. And it's something that I'm super, passionate about.
That's amazing. And I think that, from my own experiences of, being involved with patients in the cancer departments or hospitals, I do see that they get limited time sometimes with the oncologist. And I see that for the oncologists themselves, there's not always enough time to communicate what needs to be communicated. So it's amazing that you're providing that, kind of going beyond the clinic so they can access in their own time. But also you touched there on, the fact that they're going to be online searching anyway, and there's so much other information out there. You talked about, providing credible information, the risks of misinformation. We'll talk a bit more about that. I really want to explore that with you a little bit. But first of all, what excites you most about new advances in your field today?
There's so many. I think we've just seen so many new drug development, novel therapies for both breast and gynecologic cancer that's really reshaping how we treat disease. A lot of focus on where we can de-escalate, where we need to escalate, but really kind of personalizing the treatment for each patient. Where can we omit chemotherapy? Where do we need to change to a more targeted therapy? But along with that, we've seen a lot more focus on survivorship and living well both during and after cancer. And I think that that's really a focus where, in the past, people would finish their treatment and they'd be like, you're done and go live your life, right? And we know that that's really hard to do. And people, especially, I see a lot of younger patients and patients are really navigating, all right, well, how do I take care of my health now that I'm done with treatment? How do I take care of my mental health, my physical health, my bones, my sexual health, my brain? And people are really looking for that information. And so I think that we're starting to, as a community, really focus on that survivorship piece, the supportive care piece about how do we help our patients thrive after a cancer diagnosis.
Right. Now that really makes sense. I mean, I guess that the number of new treatments that have been developed and the continual, you know, advancement of treatments means that that survivorship conversation is now a much bigger part of that conversation. But I love how you talk about that conversation goes way beyond the cancer itself, the whole of life.
Yeah. And I
Mm.
think that if we can partner with our patients to take care of that, that helps them feel more confident in that, we're taking care of them as a whole person, right? I mean, it's not just the cancer piece. And obviously, as a
Mm.
medical oncologist, we can't do everything, but if we at least recognize that these things are valid and the concerns are important and we can help guide, all right, well, we really want you to see an endocrinologist or a cardiologist, really start to think about patients as whole people, which is really the most
Mm.
important.
I love it. That's fantastic. What do you think are the biggest challenges that are, and you've touched on some of them already, but let's explore this. What do you think are some of the biggest challenges that are facing your area of work, both, locally, immediately where you're working, but nationally and globally? Because I realize that, you're very active on social media and you're engaging, people at both professionals and patients, all over the world. So where do you see the biggest challenges at the moment?
I mean, I think one of the biggest challenges is clearly misinformation
Mhm.
that is really prevalent in many different ways, and it just continues. I mean, misinformation has always been prevalent, but it used to kind of hide in the dark corners of the internet, and you would have to really find it, and now it's everywhere. Whether it's from don't get a mammogram because the radiation is going to kill you, or don't get chemotherapy because the chemotherapy is going to kill you. I mean, I've seen and
Mm.
heard it all. And the problem right now is that these social media platforms don't have a way of recognizing what's accurate, what's not, right? The algorithms reward posts and videos that have a lot of engagement and have a lot of likes. And so if you're someone looking at something that has a million views and
Mm.
thousands of shares and likes, you're kind of like, oh, maybe this is something valuable or legit. And so I think that then things spiral and then the echo chamber of social media just continues. And so I think one of the hardest things is if we recommend a treatment, someone goes online and has hears something completely different. And I think
Mm.
there's value in differing opinions and having those conversations, but I'm not talking about someone who had a bad experience with the drug. I'm talking about someone who's out there saying, don't do this test or don't
Yeah.
do treatment altogether. And that can really be harmful. We know misinformation leads to worse health outcomes.
So there's this sense you're saying really that people see something that's had a lot of views and they associate that with credibility or correctness, maybe. But actually, as you say, the algorithm is perhaps what's amplifying it, and that's part of the challenge.
There's a lot of clickbait, there's a lot of
Mm.
sensational headlines. There's so many accounts on there that'll take, a snippet of something, right? And for example, there was a mouse study. Exciting, but it's in mice, so we got to be careful as to how we think about that. And it made every headline, but the headlines had nothing about mice in them, right? So you're
Oh,
reading
wow.
this headline, and the headline was about how COVID and flu viruses kind of trigger dormant breast cancer cells that they can awaken, and in mice lead to metastatic disease in the lung. So there's so much nuance to this, right? It's in mice. Well, who has dormant cells? How do we check for them? What does this mean? How much COVID? How much flu? All of that. That doesn't make it into a headline. That doesn't make it into a 30-second social media post. And so, right, and so there's plus you take that, so you're losing all the nuance. There's so much
Mm.
sensationalism, and of course, right, everyone wants information about their diagnosis, their treatment. There's a lot of fear that
Mm.
surrounds any, not just cancer, that surrounds a health condition,
Yeah.
right? Will it come back? How will I control it? How will I treat it? And then you see the sensational headline, and it's just the perfect storm. And
Mm.
so that headline, for example, isn't misinformation. It wasn't wrong. It just left out the critical parts of it, right, as to how we interpret those results.
Okay, so it's sort of like incomplete information plays as much of a role in this kind of misinformation kind of mix, really, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, there's some that's really blatantly wrong, right? People saying don't
Mm.
get a
Mm.
mammogram. Okay, we know that
Mm.
that's
Mm.
wrong, but then there's on the other side where it's not fully wrong, it's just incomplete, right? And I think that that's also part of the challenge. And I think, we're in a society where we read the first few sentences, right? We listen
Yeah.
to the first 15 seconds, and the real meat of it and the nuance of it is at 3 minutes. And so part of that is that's just the nature of how we consume content these days.
Absolutely. So it actually lends itself to that. We scroll through, we see a headline, we move to the next thing, we've received a part message. But how do you see those things, those issues of, incorrect information, incredible information, misinformation? How do you see them being addressed at the moment, and what still needs to happen, do you think?
Well, I think this is where it's really hard because it's not really being addressed. And I think
Mm,
we've talked all the time about how do you spot misinformation online, right? Well,
mm,
who is the person saying it? Do they have, what are their credentials? Where do they work? All of that. But the problem is, and I had this happen to me personally, is with AI. And there's a lot of fake accounts. I was impersonated online by multiple fake
oh my
accounts.
goodness.
So all of that, all of those ways that we talk about how to identify misinformation, they're really becoming outdated in this new world where anyone can impersonate you. And if you look me up, I'm a credible person, but here someone
Mm.
is pretending to sell detox cures for cancer. So I think it's like a whole new world of we have to really think about this. And one of the things that I think the best thing we can do at this point is recognize that social media is not medical advice. It is not your doctor.
Mm.
Is to the best that you can to have a medical team where you can bring that information that can help you vet that information is really important.
This is shocking. So you actually had, I mean, it seems like only, a couple of years ago that there were these kind of, it felt like science fiction when we talked about the idea of a deep fake of somebody being impersonated and the video going out. And, it seemed like, a scary futuristic world. And now you're talking about this actually happened to you, right? There was
Yeah.
a total fake of you made promoting something that you weren't actually promoting.
And I didn't know about it until someone actually had found it and asked me something about it, and people started calling my office asking for these medicines that I do not promote or stand against, and so it was really interesting. But there were a number of accounts all over the different social media platforms. My name, my using my likeness to
Mm.
promote all these things that were inaccurate. And the challenge with this is that there's not a good way to get them taken down.
Mm.
That's the problem. So I was able to get them down on some social media platforms, but not others. Some are still up. And there's no guarantee it won't happen again. I every other day I have to start searching my name on all these
Mm.
platforms to make sure nothing else has popped up because you know what are the ramifications of this if a patient purchases something, does take something that is harmful, right? What are the implications of that?
Mm.
And
Mm.
I think as we talk about how I think more doctors should be on social media, this is a big reason why people are not on social media, right? What it like that's scary.
That is scary. And I think that, when I see your work on social media, you put out so much great content. I was listening to your podcast and I was like, wow, you've put out more than 180 episodes on your podcast and you have so much great content on. We'll talk a bit more about your social media channels and so on. But on top of that, now you have to kind of guard and protect your likeness and how that's being used to even police information that you apparently are saying, which you may not be. That's really daunting. But can I ask you, take you back a bit to how important has social media been in your work, in your professional life so far?
I mean, I think it really has transformed my career in so many different ways, which has been really cool. I mean, I think that years ago, right, started putting stuff out there, kind of testing the waters, and people really responded, and there was clearly value. But as a result of that, I was able to get involved with the American Society of Clinical Oncology, a number of the nonprofit advocacy organizations, and really get my name and my voice out there. And it's been helpful for me. I think has helped me become a better doctor. Just recognizing what patients need, right? By
Wow.
engaging with patients, people are saying, "Wait a second, like." But you can hear what they're worried about, what their concerns are that don't always come across in the clinic. And I think, so it's been really transformative, and having opportunities to speak on platforms like this. I have a book coming out as a result of it. So it's really, really changed the trajectory of my career.
I love how you just said that you've become a better doctor by talking to patients online. That's amazing. How do you approach that? How do you approach talking with patients online? I mean, it sounds like it could be potentially really challenging, risky. There are many who would say, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to talk to a patient online because I'm exposed to too much risk. How do you approach it?
So I think the first thing, I just kind of listened. I was kind of start myself in there, just kind of listened and kind of started seeing what are people commenting on, what questions were they asking. And I think number one is listening and just hearing what are people asking about, right? If I posted something and there were 10 questions of the exact same nature, well, clearly that's a piece that's not being explained well, or people still have questions on, right? So it's helped me to understand, like, especially then how I talk to patients in the clinic, like what are the topics I need to focus on. But I think the piece is that it's not a doctor patient relationship. I'm not engaging in a doctor patient relationship with patients. I'm very clear to not provide any medical advice. I mean, and I do, if people reach out and they ask for medical advice, and I would love to help everyone, but I can't because it isn't a doctor patient relationship, and I don't have their medical history. These are not HIPAA protected platforms. And so I'm very clear about that. But I think just listening and seeing, and then, people do reach out. I'm very clear that I can't provide that guidance to them. And that I hope they find a medical team that they can connect with. So keeping it very, again, not anything specific is important.
Oh, that sounds like really good kind of guardrails. Um, can I ask you which platforms matter most for you right now and why?
Yeah, so Instagram definitely is number one. I will post everything on TikTok as well, mostly because TikTok has a little bit of better editing software, so it's easier to
Okay.
make it on TikTok and post it to Instagram. But a slightly different population there. I find that TikTok's a little, there's not as much. I don't know. I feel like on Instagram there's a little bit more of a community and more of a connection. And someone else will say that for TikTok, right? So I think it's just what platform nurtured and grown. I would love to do more on YouTube, but it's just not something that I have the time to really commit to. I mean, I think the challenge is that each platform, to really succeed on that platform, and again, everyone's measure of success is different. I like to say it shouldn't be about likes and followers, but it's authentic engagement and connection. But it takes time to nurture that and to grow that. And so I think sometimes people start out, they're not really sure, like, what should I be doing? And just picking one platform and then you can start to expand, can be really easy to do in that way.
So it sounds like you see TikTok as a bit of a content creation platform, but Instagram more as like where the engagement really happens with patients.
Exactly. I think there's easier, just based on that software, it's a little bit easier to comment and respond to, and you can do question boxes and stuff. And you can do some of that on TikTok, but Instagram just feels a little easier to do. But again, that's just because I spent more time on that platform. Someone else will tell you the complete opposite.
Yeah, of course. In my last series, I was talking with Dr. Shalam Beg, oncologist, medical oncologist, and he mentioned you actually as somebody who he really saw as making a huge difference on Instagram as a platform, or some of the more media rich and kind of creative platforms. And he spends a lot of time on X, formerly Twitter, and we had a bit of a conversation about that. Where does X fall into your kind of social engagement?
So really little. The reason I actually did Instagram was because there was Twitter was so saturated with other people at the time, and I was like, I'm not really sure what I'm going to add here. Whereas Instagram was kind of almost like an untapped area. So I do a little bit on X. I think before a lot of the change in the platform happened, I think it was really helpful, especially surrounding congresses. Great place to get medical information. So I think of that more as a professional networking engagement area, rather than, it's not really patient facing. Where the patients that are there are more in the advocacy space. So,
Oh, yeah.
I think Instagram is kind of more of just lay patient, if you
Oh,
will.
really? I love
Um,
that you can reach people there. Yeah.
but now I think X is hard. I mean, it's hard to find the people and find the good content. And so I
Mm,
haven't spent very little time on there. And I think then we have Threads and we have Blue Sky, and none of those have
yeah.
ever really been able to take off as well. And so I think I still engage on X, especially around meetings, but it's just not the same as it was. But it was never my like main platform because my goal
Mm,
is always patient facing. And so I think as people think
mm,
about, am I going to engage online? What are your goals, right? Are you trying to network a little bit, but mostly educate patients? Or are you really trying to
mm.
focus on network and research professional development? That's going to be your, platforms like X or LinkedIn too, which can be really helpful.
Oh, yeah, that's right. And yeah, and we definitely see that, right? During a medical congress, a meeting, a real spike in conversations on X and those kind of platforms. There was this time when you just mentioned, Threads and Blue Sky. There was a kind of time when we wondered, are all the peer-to-peer healthcare professional conversations going to move to Blue Sky or not? And then we kind of look back on that, and how do you see that kind of the change in those kind of platforms?
It never really took off. I mean, partly because I feel like Blue Sky didn't have a lot of the features that we need, like hashtags or ways that you could group information and quickly search for information.
Mm.
And so, I mean, I think there's possibility, but it's hard, right? Also, people are busy. No one really wants yet another social media
Yeah,
platform. I think we're all kind of, all right, well, phones are important, but also like less social media, and so I
yeah.
think that just one more platform just feels like no, thank you. It's
Mm.
I can't even tell you last time I logged into Blue Sky.
No. uh, Thinking about the work that you do, engaging patients on particularly Instagram and so on, could you share a recent example of how social media has, made a real difference for you or for your patients?
Yeah, I mean, I think I get this all the time. I'll get messages daily from people saying, I saw your video and I talked to my doctor about it, and they talked to me about this trial, or we're going to start this supportive medicine. So I think it helps people on a, it's hard to measure. I think that,
Mm,
we think about people measure social media growth, or, for people, a lot of people, if you think of like academic promotion and professional work, in academic institutions. So how do you measure that, right? And so I think yes, you can measure it by followers or engagement, but the bottom line is, right, we're helping people, helping people. And so
mm,
when someone sends me a message that, I was having a lot of sexual health issues and I saw your video on vaginal estrogen and I asked my doctor about it and they prescribed it for me, I mean, what bigger measure of success is that, right?
wow.
Than we directly helped a patient. Now, would they have found vaginal estrogen from somebody else? Maybe, probably, right? There's other people talking about these topics online. Um, but I think it's really important that that there are more voices on there. There's
Mm,
a lot
mm,
of voices in women's health and menopause, but there's and cardiology and primary care, but there's very few voices in oncology
mm.
online, which I think is an issue because cancer is so prevalent and growing.
And we talked about we already talked about misinformation and some of the challenges around that. Is there anything that you've learned about building trust and building credibility and clarity when you're communicating in those public social media channels?
Yeah, I think that the credibility is really important. I think we've talked about that before, but you have to you can spend years, and I have spent years creating a platform, and you can knock it down in one video, right? Like,
Right.
and so I think thinking about as people grow, there's a lot of companies, there's a lot of people that want to do brand deals and promotion,
Mm,
and I don't really think of myself as an influencer. I'm not trying to sell people anything. I'm not trying to promote a certain product. Have I
mm,
done something here and there? Yes, if it's something I really believe in, but I mostly don't because, again, you really want to stay as authentic and credible, right? And I have been approached by different pharmaceutical companies to promote certain things, and then it's a fine line, right? Because if you're promoting a medication, or not promoting, but talking about it, let's
yeah.
say, in a way that you were paid for it, well, what happens when you you prescribe that medication, the
Mm,
patient has seen that video. It's just, I don't know. I don't do any of that. I don't do any branded content,
mm.
because I think you can really lose your credibility that way.
It's kind of almost self-undermining, or takes away maybe the integrity of like your professional opinion. If somebody knows that you were actually paid to say that, perhaps that
Yeah,
makes the patient less confident.
exactly. And so I think that that's something that I have made a decision for myself to do. There are people who do
Mhm.
branded content, but I think part of that is just being authentic. I think look, social media is a highlight reel. You obviously don't see everything, but I think being authentic, protecting at all costs patient boundaries, patient information. I will not post, anything about a patient that I saw in the clinic, or
Mm,
you
good
know,
point.
I'll maybe do a composite of like, but I won't ever do anything that has any identifying characteristics. I mean, imagine if and I see this all the time. Imagine if you came to see your doctor and then a story of you showed up online, right?
I
Now,
know.
no patient identifiers, but you could probably figure it out. And so
Mm,
I really make sure that nothing that I do online would ever make anyone, or try to make sure that no one feels uncomfortable about it. Because that would not be.
right. So you don't want to lose the trust of the patient in clinic when you actually see them in person.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So
Yeah.
I think it's a fine line. It's a lot. It's really, you have to be really careful. And I think that because of all of this, right? People, it's a lot of work. There's a lot of boundaries. There's a lot of issues with it, and so people don't do it. Um, but then the misinformation continues to grow, right? And so
Mm,
I think we need to fix misinformation on a bigger scale, which is going to take a lot of time and effort. But I like to think about, like, what can I do on a day-to-day basis, and that is just trying to share good, accurate, evidence-based information. And I don't insert my opinion. I just share the facts, right? Like, I'm not going in and saying, well, I'm giving everyone this drug, right? I really try to make sure I save my
mm.
recommendations for, like, I would give you this drug over that drug for the clinic. And online, I'm just posting the data in a way that patients can understand and digest.
It's brilliant. It's brilliant. And I really loved seeing, on your content, there is that real authenticity. There's that real humanness. This is me talking about what I've seen and how it can help you. Um, where do you see the greatest opportunities, looking ahead over the next 2 to 3 years, where do you see the greatest opportunities for health professionals using social media?
I don't know. I mean, I think we're at a point where things, we're in almost, is social media going to continue the way that it is? Or are there going to be changes? I think we don't know. I think there's a lot of change in our healthcare system in general. And so the people are really wondering what's going to
Mm,
happen. So I don't think we know yet. We know that what I don't think will change is people will continue to go online to get their health information. But a lot of that depends on what is the health information we're getting as a nation as a whole, right, and from
mm,
leadership. And so it's a lot of change. I think we just don't know. There's been a lot of concerns for cuts for cancer research, and people are worried
yeah.
about how that's going to impact everything. So I I don't really have a great sense, but I think everyone wants information and they want good information. So my goal, my plan is just to keep showing up and see what happens.
Love it. Can I ask you about who maybe inspires you? Who do you see using social media particularly well right now for better health? Maybe healthcare professionals or scientists, but maybe patients. Who's out there that you kind of think this is a great example?
I mean, I think there's a lot of great physicians that are doing it. What I love about different physicians is that everyone has their own goal of how to do
Mm,
it, and it's one of my good friends, Amy Commander, is a breast oncologist, and her whole focus is on lifestyle and health and wellness, and so all of her posts are talking about the benefits of movement and exercise and
mm,
nutrition and kind of motivating in that way. And everyone there's an oncologist, Shruti Patel, who's doing stuff on GI cancers. And so and so I think it's really fun watching people kind of have that niche online, and we
mm,
can learn from each
mm.
other. But I think really, so I love to see other health professionals on there, but I think seeing how patients are advocating for themselves really gives me a more of a window into what that survivorship and thriver world is really like, right? And
Mm.
how what it really means to live after a cancer diagnosis. So, different things, but I think the key is figuring out everyone has different goals online, and it's really
Mm.
kind of each one's motivating to see in a different way.
That's so cool. I think that you talked already about listening, the role of listening, and sort of back to that now again as well, just listening to the patients and learning from that. Do you think that are there lessons that you've borrowed from outside of healthcare as well, from maybe social media in non-medical fields that you found helpful or have inspired your own social media activity?
Yeah, I mean, I think it kind of comes back to authenticity, right? And I mean, there's a lot.
Mm.
I like to think about like who are the people that I follow that I like to follow, right? Just as a person, not as a doctor, and a lot of that is you want to follow people that you feel somewhat connected to. I mean, there's these weird like parasocial relationships on social media, right? You don't actually know
Mhm.
these
Yeah,
people, but
yeah.
you follow them and you want to see what's going on in their lives. And so, one of the things that I don't do a lot of, but I do try to have that personal a little bit, right? And if I'm traveling, I'll try to show that. I'll try to post the books that I'm
Mm.
reading or workouts that I'm doing. And so trying to connect in that way, that's a little because also like no one wants to talk about cancer all the time, and it's fun to talk about other things. And so I
Mm.
try to do that. I'm very protective. I don't post anything about my kids online. I feel very very
Mm.
strongly about that, and so I do think kind of having those boundaries is important, but
Yeah.
having that personal touch matters.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess that also kind of supports that building of authenticity and credibility, not necessarily as a tactic, but because people see the real you, that maybe helps to connect when you then talk with them about science.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's hard. I mean, you know, you you post maybe a few things a day, if that, on social media, right? It's like 10,
Mm.
20 seconds of your day, and this whole other day, right? And so I think one of the hard things is too is sometimes if I have a really hard clinic, if I'm having really difficult conversations, sometimes it doesn't feel authentic in that moment to then go post the social media video, right? So I think part of
Right.
that is just thinking about posting. People ask me, do you plan what you're going to post? And I say no, because I think it's organic with what I'm doing in clinic, what's out there, how the day's going.
Mm. Yeah. Wow. Amazing. What advice would you give to other healthcare professionals who want to, grow their knowledge and make a better impact online?
I think the key is know what your goals are, right? What are you trying? What's
Mm.
your what is what why are you doing it? Are you doing
Mm.
it to? And everyone has different goals, right? Some people it's a creative outlet. That's a great goal. For some people, they want to build a practice and get more patients, grow their practice and engage more patients. Some
Mm.
people want to use it for research recruitment. Whatever your goal is, right? Knowing what your is important,
Mm.
but also not to just get bogged down by how many people liked it and I'm not going viral and I don't have a lot of followers, right? And I think just it takes
Mm.
time, and that shouldn't be the goal, right? I think figuring out like why am I doing it, and again, it can just be a fun, creative outlet. Not everything has to have metrics and things that you're like looking for. What I post now is very different than what I used to post, and it's
Mm.
evolved, right? As I think about what I'm interested in posting in, and like I used to be much more like I got to make the pretty graphic and I got to do
Mm.
this, and I'm like, no, I'm in my car. This is what you get, and they're not curated videos. I used to like post this and that. Like I don't do that anymore. And so I think just evolving with who you are as a person and what is
Mm.
important feels important and helpful for you.
So I really like that idea that, if you focus too much on the metrics, maybe it becomes more like an ego trip. But if you just forget the ego and just do what you want to do, that's maybe not only more authentic, but probably is going to make you happier in terms of the work you're doing there on social media anyway.
Yeah, and I think that sometimes you see people who have a lot of followers, and you think, oh my gosh, like I don't have 5,000 followers, and I've been doing this for a month. What's wrong, right? And recognizing that all these people with big accounts took a lot of time to get there, and so not
Mm.
comparing yourself to other people is really important. But what I do recommend and what can be helpful is if someone's making a social media account, reach out to the people that you've been following and say, hey, I'm here, I welcome any advice. And if
Mm.
someone's new to social media, I'll share their account and say, hey, follow this person, they're going to talk about this thing or that. But it takes time. A lot of people start doing something and then they go, I made 2 or 3 posts, it was a lot of work, and I moved on,
Yeah.
right? Or they feel like, oh, I have to like really think about what you're going to post. I really have to plan out the content. And my advice is, when you see a patient in the clinic and they ask you a question, you're not planning out the content, right? You're just answering
No, right.
the question, right? So take one 30-second interaction from your day with a patient who maybe asked you about, let's say, managing nausea, and say that into the camera. Here are my 3 ways to manage nausea, right? It's easy, it's authentic, and you're done. So I think part of that is people are afraid of, like, what am I going to post? How am I going to say it? How am I going to do it? I just think of like you're talking to a patient online in your office, right? You're not preparing your response. You're just, here's what I know.
That's great. I love it. It's a great tip, just that it's grounded in your real world experience. So you don't have to kind of do the thinking twice. You've
Yeah,
already done the thinking, had the conversation
yeah,
to
exactly,
create some content.
exactly.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And I know we said it's not all about metrics and so on, but honestly, your content has achieved an incredible reach, and you've obviously reached, a huge number of patients and supported so many people through the social media content alone. But if you were starting over today, what would you do differently?
I think I would when I started, videos weren't really a thing. Reels weren't a thing. It was all
Mm,
static content. And so at that point, yes, I think there was more pressure to make it pretty. And, I don't think I would do anything differently, honestly. I think the iterations of it, they're all essentially similar, just a little bit different. But, I learned from doing each thing, right? I would post these kind of things, and I saw this resonates with people. This doesn't resonate with people. But I will say, even when some things only resonate with a few people, that help those few people. So,
mm.
I think I really don't think I would do anything differently. I would just, I don't, because it all was a learning curve that helped me to get to where I am.
Right, yeah, exactly. No, that really makes sense. Just kind of learning as you go through that experience and that interaction. I love it. Well, Dr. Teplinsky, thank you so much for taking the time to speak. I've learned so much more again every time we talk about this. I just love learning about your experience and what you're doing, and really admire your work. If people want to find you online, what's the best place to go find you?
Yes, I'm Dr. Teplinsky on pretty much all social media platforms. My podcast is Interlude on all podcast platforms. So I would love to see you there.
Fantastic. Thanks again, and keep up the great work.
Thanks for having me.
This has been Better Listening for Better Health. I'm Daniel Jin. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to follow or subscribe so you don't miss the next one. If you loved it, please tell somebody and tell me what you liked. Comment or email me at daniel@creation.co. And whatever you do, keep listening.